to be what that seems to be.
January was a great example of that, where a number of collaborative mini projects were kicked off, including the development of I suppose the holy grail of rubrics when it comes to ePortfolio development or ePortfolio assessment. And my screen, thanks Orna, and a number of other initiatives. So that's a little bit about where we're coming from with regards to ePortfolio Ireland and the group that we are. So Beth, could I hand over to you to introduce who you are just for a moment before we go into where you can find us?
Sure, can you hear me okay?
Yep, perfect.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much, Lisa. I'm Beth Gordon from Pace University, and my role there is Assistant Vice President for IT, and I oversee academic technology and user services and help desk and a few other areas. But my consistent role at Pace over the years has always been working on ePortfolios, and we adopted Mahara in 2010. And at the time we adopted Mahara, in the U.S., Mahara wasn't very widely used, and it was kind of difficult for us using open source tool to get help. We were used to using purchase products like Blackboard and other tools where there was always a rep and an onboarding. And what we found was that it was a bit of a scramble. And although we liked Mahara, we were struggling a bit. So we reached out to some other area schools, first just in the New York metro areas. Keith is here on the call with us. It's one of our early collaborations, and what started as a few local schools getting together to help learn about Mahara and get started expanded, and we soon had some international members as well, Roger from Solent and Sam Taylor and a few others, and of course Christina worked with us closely all along the way. And so we formed a Mahara user group back in 2011, 2012, and in the early days focused more on the technical aspects of Mahara. But as the group evolved, really worked more on some of the pedagogical issues and issues related to assessment, and started developing more of a wish list for where we wanted Mahara and ePortfolios to go in the future. So that's kind of a little bit of background about our group, and we haven't been so active in the recent months. I think, like so many of us, we get pulled into other projects. But I was so pleased to get to meet you, Lisa, and to connect with your group. And I'm just looking forward to hearing the conversations and learning more from all of you.
That's great, super. Thanks a million, Beth. Yes, Beth and I met at a conference in New York that myself and Orna attended last year. So it's absolutely great to have that kind of transatlantic conversation, because you are a little bit ahead of us in DCU in that we adopted Mahara in 2016. So great to learn a little bit from those that are just that bit far ahead of us. So for any of you, and not just our Irish participants, if you're interested in joining ePortfolio in our online home, we do have a Yammer group where any resources that have come from any of our face-to-face or webinar meetings have been posted, along with additional resources. Our most recent post is that rubric that I mentioned, but any literature that we come across, we do also post up there. So if anyone wants to get in touch with me, and I will put my information into the chat box as we go along, I'm more than happy to add you to our group. So with that in mind, the conversations today are around ePortfolio practice, and just to give our colleagues outside of the country a little bit of a background to where we are in Ireland as regards ePortfolio practice. We have a lot of interest. That's something I can say for sure. We have, in DCU alone, we have over 9,000 users in an institution-wide initiative, but it's still really only pockets of use rather than widespread use that dominates. And in general, across Ireland, ePortfolio use is probably at very early stages. And what was interesting in it, the Y1 feedback project that was conducted in 2016 that Orna was part of, One of the studies indicated that the creation of digital artifacts for assessment is one of the least used assessment methods. So we're not quite there yet as a country, but with Eportfolio Ireland, hopefully we'll be able to support practitioners out there. So moving on, the conversations today actually came out of the Eportfolio unconference that happened in January. So almost 50 people came to a face-to-face event, and the agenda was decided in the room on the day. So some of the most, I suppose, critical areas or key areas for practitioners turned out to be supporting critical reflection and assessment and creativity within ePortfolio practice. So we thought that we might use those as a kicking off point. So at this point, I'll happily hand over to Orna and Julie to lead a little bit of a discussion around supporting critical reflection with ePortfolios.
Hello. So I just thought I'd start off with a couple of quotes to get us thinking about critical reflection. And Julie then has some experiences from the student point of view to share, and then we're going to throw it out to the group. So at that point I'll enable your mics, so feel free to either use your mic or to use the chat box, whichever you're comfortable with. So two, I suppose, two key quotes according to Orna about reflection. So the first is from Einan and Gabino, so from their book on the Catalyst to Learning project that myself and Lisa discovered at that same New York conference. So it's a great resource if you're looking for something to get you started. So I like that quote because they say reflection is the vehicle for learning in ePortfolio, and it really is reflective writing. So the means through which people articulate their experience. So yes, it's very important, and if you've done a bit of reading in this area, you'll find that most people agree that reflection is very important. But at the same time, students find it very challenging to reflect. So you've got kind of two sides of the coin. And I have another quote there from Landis, Scott and Can there. So they did a very nice qualitative study, which they interviewed staff and students. And what they found was the instructors or the teachers found that students had a very limited ability to reflect. And they were very surprised by this. But then they realized, okay, if we can give them a bit of help, scaffolding, they can actually write reflectively. So as a starting point, it's very important, but students find it very challenging to do, so they need a lot of help, support, scaffolding, examples, model portfolios, even perhaps some models to follow on how to reflect. So I might hand over to you now, Julie, if you want to
Super.
Give us a little on the student perspective.
Okay, hi everybody. As Orna said, I'm going to focus a little bit more on the student perspective in relation to critical reflection, because when we started using portfolios here in Marino back in 2011 as a pilot, and then over the last few years we've been gradually increasing the use of the portfolio for all students. We started to do a little bit of research to see, okay, what do students actually think about portfolios? How are they using them? Do they have the same understanding of portfolios as we do? Because we were saying, yes, this is all about reflection and we're helping our students be more reflective, but the questions we were getting from students and the comments we were getting from students didn't relate to reflection. They were very much more tech-based and talking about the technology and various platforms. So some research I did as part of a European Erasmus project, EEP, kind of just shows there that students really felt the benefit of portfolios was not that they increased their critical reflective skills, but that they got to store information. Maybe we should have bought them a USB key instead of a portfolio. And sort of that they saw it as a way to access information, not to do anything with the information, but just to access it and make it available to us as well. And there was a very strong sense from students that the portfolio was favouring those students who had better technological skills. And I'm very much the first to say, hands up, I don't have the best of tech skills at all. I'm learning as I go. So I try to reassure students that no, it's not about your tech skills, it's about the relationship with the content, integrating the content, applying your knowledge, all of that. But no, they still very much focused on the tech side of things. And even just that wordle there, when I asked students to define what a portfolio was, an e-portfolio was, their focus very much was on, okay, yes, it's online, but it's about information and it's to do with work. Reflection didn't feature strongly, even though we were using it as a place for them to store their reflections and kind of interact with their tutors on work placement. So it's just sort of to balance that what the literature is saying, yes, about reflection, but then from a student's point of view and how they interpret portfolios, it is very much, when they're starting off, it's on the tech basis. So maybe
and just to come in on that point, Julie, that just to refer back to that Scott Kahn study, they actually found the same for instructors and teachers, that they may have started using the e-portfolio for various different reasons, you know, maybe careers or for an assignment, but they hadn't thought too much about the reflective part either. But soon the teachers realized, oh, this is really important too, and then they began to highlight this to the students. So from that study there, the Landeskog one. Ooh. Okay, so now over to you. So we've got just one discussion question there. How would you support students to effectively reflect in their e-portfolio? So as I say, feel free to use the chat box or the mics, whichever you like. I'm going to turn on everyone's mic now. Karen?
Hi, I just thought I'd jump in on this conversation because I work in the initial teacher education sector, and certainly I think, you know, we speak an awful lot about deepening reflection, and we talk an awful lot about, you know, how we try and encourage our graduate student teachers to do more than just describe what they're doing. I think certainly it comes down to maybe linking theory with practice, and I would suggest that some of the ways that we can effectively encourage our students to reflect in their portfolios is to maybe perhaps give them some kind of framework, provide them with some kind of simple but effective reflection tools. So something that, say, we use in our program in Hibernia College would be, we use a couple of different frameworks, but say the Driscoll and Teff from 2001, what, so what, and now what. I think that can be a really simple but a really effective way to deepen the reflection and move it away from just being a very top-line descriptive way of just, you know, telling a story about what happened. So I think sometimes it's actually implementing a framework can be quite effective.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else want to come in on that? I see lots of chat box action.
Yep.
And I see suggestions of things like prompts, different models as well, like you mentioned, Karen. Anyone else got anything else interesting they use?
Just in relation to Edward there and the resources relation to reflection, I actually did a workshop series in the middle of it for our faculty, and when actually discussing how to stimulate reflection, and I had some very basic information on different cycles that I had posted up to Mahara for our students. Conveniently, there was a librarian in the session as well. So actually, yeah, there's a lot of information out there on that, and it's just a case of pointing the students to the right place, and in which case now it won't be my very brief materials, it'll actually be to the library resources, which would be more detailed.
And I think Beth makes a very good point there as well, to show examples of other students to model, and that's something that Lisa has started doing, which I think is really useful. Yeah, and Gibbs as well. Well, you're preempting our next slide, so I may as well go to that. So you can see Gibbs is there, yeah, but I mean, certainly prompts, teaching students about different reflective cycles they can use. Julie has some nice prompts here. Julie,
yeah,
you might want to...
It's something that arose out of our whole conundrum about getting students to reflect and encouraging them to reflect, and that trying to get them said that the e-portfolio was enabling their reflection as opposed to stilting their reflection. So as part of a pilot for the Erasmus EEP project, I came up with this template to scaffold students' reflections through their 4 years of their undergraduate degree. So in first years, we got them looking at the personal dimension, well, across all years, sorry, the personal dimension, the professional dimension, looking at the academic dimension, trying to encourage some applied knowledge, and then also having reflection actually as a separate element, although everything that they're doing there is the reflection. And we found that that's helped because it's giving students the support in year 1, and then in year 2 they're extending it a little bit more, we're asking for a little bit more, we're expecting more, and year 3 the same thing. And all of this is under non-assessed conditions. When then they go into 4th year, when they take a portfolio and do their portfolio in 4th year, it is actually assessed, but they've had the experience and they feel a little bit more comfortable with it. So that's what we found has certainly helped with our students reflecting. It'll be interesting to hear if other people are using similar templates or not.
Yeah, I mean, I just from my personal experience, I've done both. I used a template last year, and this year I'm using no template. But what I did was I gave them guiding questions. And here, like just another example of some guiding questions are there by Zub Zarida there. So they're for kind of developmental portfolio. Anyone else? Any prompts? I mean, you're right about the whole stifling creativity thing about having too much template, and that was why this year I tried no template just to see what would happen.
Maybe just come in there and
it's also far less work for me.
Yeah,
creativity because
it would be really interesting.
Sorry, just the stifling creativity, because that was a problem we had, that the first year we were using the portfolios, we gave a lot of prompts, and then we found that what we were getting back were carbon copies of various portfolios, but from different students, and then we went to no templates at all. And I think you have to trial and error with your students, and to feel comfortable with that trial and error and see how students respond to it as well, so that you can get a happy balance.
And currently in Mahara, although I believe there's a new button coming out that pushes templates out, the whole copying the template, I find, is a barrier to students.
Yeah, I'll absolutely speak to that. That has been a real struggle for me because I'm supporting across DCU all faculty, and again, as Suzanne mentioned, for first year students, providing a template helps them get over some of the technical difficulties about how it works. So it's much more about text and artifact entry. So we have been providing templates, but the process of doing that within Mahara is complex. It really shouldn't be. There's only 3 buttons to press, but our students find it complex. So there's, rather than have cognitive overload and trying to deal with, being able to reflect, but first you have to find the template, and then you have to copy it, and then you have to add your information. It was something that I wanted to look at developing, and myself and Rob Dalton from UL, University of Limerick, we came together, and it was something that he was interested in as well. So we are co-funding the development of a plugin which will push out templates so that the faculty member within a group will be able to push out a template to all group members, and it will sit directly then in their portfolio page list. So no more finding, no more copying, and it should at least streamline that piece so they can focus on the content, which is really what they need to be focusing on. At the moment, we are working with Christina so that it will go into core. It has turned out to be slightly more costly than we had initially anticipated. So at this point, we're still hopeful that what we develop will be suitable to go into core. I should have confirmation on that within this week.
Great. Certainly that was one of the reasons I decided this year to use no template, because I thought, I'm not going to go in to every profile and try and figure out how to set up their templates or support 200 people to set up a template. So was very attractive to me to let them have free rein.
And Karen, just to come back to your point, you're right that the pushing of templates is limited if you do need to edit and update the template. And that's where the additional expenditure came in when we were looking at making it suitable for core. So really there's two issues, pushing it out to new members and then updating it and being able to push it out again. So that piece may not happen, but hopefully the ability to create a template at the outset and then push it out to existing group members will happen.
I'd also like to come in and say that we've also had sort of similar problems in the copying the template with Mahara. That's being a very barrier. Also, partially conceptually, the idea of what is the point of a portfolio, and because I think some of the students don't get the fact that they need to collect a load of evidence and then cherry pick the bits they think are appropriate to then present for assessment. And they just sort of look at it as an assignment and just do everything at the end, and then, well, I'm going to stick everything in because that's a bit for the assignment. There's not really a sort of, it's hard to get that whole thing. It's like you're doing this over time and you're collecting loads of different things and then presenting what you want to for the assessment. I think that's definitely something we struggle to get across sometimes to the students.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's the challenge of developmental versus showcase portfolio, really, isn't it? And we want it to do all things.
Mm-hmm. Maybe it can't, though.
I struggle with it being both simultaneously.
Sorry, did you say that we're then trying to use Mahara to automatically push templates out to certain students? Is that something that's a new feature?
Yes. We're mid-development of that,
okay.
between myself and between DCU and the University of Limerick, and we are trying to develop it in such a way that it's suitable to go into core and would be available to all Mahara users then for 1810.
One of the ideas we're trying to do is convert our HE application, which is Higher Education Academy, which all academics are required, well, our university are required to do. And we're thinking about using Mahara as the means by which they have to do it, because one of our things we have to get over is getting the academics used to the system, and therefore they're able to then best support their students. Because if the academics, we found that academics who tend to be negative about a certain system, the students seem to think it's impossible to use it, whereas the academics are more positive about it. They tend to have no issues whatsoever. So again, trying to get people to agree to use Mahara for the HA application, which all academics are required to do. If we had some sort of template system that can be pushed out, then that might help people to be, as soon as they enroll in the HA thing, then they can automatically get templates.
Yeah, and I think the whole practice what you're saying is a good idea.
Yeah. But if you can take technology out of the equation, and look at us, we're on a discussion about critical reflection and all of a sudden we're down a road of technology development. It's very easy to get focused on the technology.
Good point. Okay, we might move on to the next portion then, Lisa.
Yeah, so if no one has anything else to add as regards critical reflection and how we can support students in doing that, kind of wanted to move on to another topic which came out of the conference, and that was creativity. And how can you, I suppose, enable creativity in your students, and what degree of creativity have you seen? So I suppose I really wanted to leave this as kind of an open mic session for you to tell us, what have you seen that's inspired you, that impressed you with your student work? How creative have your students been? What would you like to see more of? Now obviously that may depend on platform choice, but some of the examples of our students getting more creative than we expected, to be honest, because a lot of them were working off plain templates. Now, obviously, with Mahara, you have the ability to embed various artifacts, but we have seen students doing reflective pieces to camera as opposed to written reflections. We've seen video interviews with conference presenters, which is really interesting. Podcasts, embedded prezzies. So there's lots of different ways that the students can, I suppose, can be creative, not just in the artifacts they choose, but in the design, the overall design of their ePortfolios. So if you have anything interesting to share, as I said, that's impressed you or inspired you, it would be great, because perhaps then we could encourage our students to do something similar. So open mic for anybody who wants it, or just pop it in the chat box.
So I think when we were starting to talk about this, it actually came out of conversations from the unconference. I was really inspired by some of the, again, I suppose, the initial teacher education students. And really, without sounding too neoliberal and going down a different route, what I found is that many of the student teachers that we're working with are finding new and really creative ways of demonstrating their competencies and skills. Now, a lot of that is, I suppose, bound up in the requirements and their assessment. But what I found is that there's been some really lovely multimedia presentations. There's been some really nice YouTubing. There's been some really nice artifacts that students are creating. And I think what they're starting to do within their own networks, and certainly within their own peer groups, is that they're starting to find platforms. Quite often what we're finding is that they're finding free software, free platforms to demonstrate their competencies. And one of the really nice ways that I saw evidence really recently was a critical incident. And I suppose identifying critical incidents in a teacher's practice, because as you know, Portfolio has been used for forever and ever with teacher training. And really what we're asking our students is to provide some kind of written record about their experiences of planning and preparing and delivering teaching and learning. But what has actually started to develop was students are finding really creative ways to develop a critical incident identification tool, and they're actually becoming really honest and really reflective and upfront in mistakes or errors that are happening in their teaching and learning. And they're actually coming together and finding out different ways of maybe problem solving. For example, a lesson plan that went awry, a classroom management topic that was really, really difficult or really challenging. And what they're doing is they're finding ways of kind of creating conversations amongst themselves to really get creative on problem solving. And I thought that was a really hopeful way for me, say for example, who's quite new to this whole ePortfolio, is moving away from just having our portfolio as a really heavy and something that Julie mentioned earlier as being a really cumbersome piece of work that has to be done, into something that has really prepared our students for real life and real work issues. So I certainly want to try and foster that a little bit more. If anybody else has any other experience of seeing that kind of student creativity, I just thought it was a really nice way that I've seen. So I definitely think it's a way we can hopefully encourage our students to relate theory to practice and use their ePortfolios in a really practical way.
Super. Yeah, so a whole different approach, I suppose, to how they went about assessment and thinking about how they would answer those questions. I'm actually going to put somebody on the spot here across the room, because I know that my colleague Laura here has developed her own teaching portfolio and included a lot of different forms of media within her portfolio to, I suppose, demonstrate her philosophy and learning journey. Laura, would you like to say a word? Whether you can put it in the chat box, or Orna can turn on your mic.
A bit quiet, yeah.
I'll speak up. Yes, as Lisa mentioned,
Be quiet.
I have been working on my teaching portfolio, which has been quite a learning curve for me in terms of getting to grips with Mahara and, I suppose, figuring out all the various tools and technologies that I can use. So I suppose it's taken a while, but it has certainly allowed me to be very creative in terms of incorporating lots of different types of media, some of which I've created externally and then embedded, and others I'm using Mahara itself, using Google Slides and things like that. It's certainly pushed me, I suppose, to move away from a very text-based portfolio, which is what I had, and to use imagery. I've incorporated a podcast, Prezi, Wordles, a video in there. I'm trying to think now a little off the top of my head. Twitter, I have a Twitter feed, so there's lots of different examples of media there, but the one thing I would say is that it has definitely been a little bit time consuming, I suppose, and I've thought a bit about, it was student motivation and the amount of time and effort it takes to incorporate these quite creative and media rich artifacts into portfolios. So I've really enjoyed it and seen it as a bit of a personal challenge, playing around with the settings and trying to get it to work. But I think we do have to be mindful of the demands that we might place on students, and perhaps probably maybe the more motivated or engaged students that will really embrace the many technologies that can be incorporated, or features, I suppose, that can be incorporated into learning portfolios. But it certainly does open a great wealth of artifacts if students will persevere, and I suppose if we recognise and reward the effort that it takes to move beyond a very text-based assignment submission, which is what they're quite used to.
And just to pick up on a point there, Laura, about the time consuming, certainly there's a good body of literature on the student perspective on ePortfolio, and the top two gripes that come out very strongly are time consuming, and the second is technical trouble.
That's interesting, Warren. I wasn't aware of the literature in this area. It is time consuming, and there's a little bit of, it's a bit fiddly in terms of tech, but I do think it's worth it. I mean, I can see that my portfolio is so much richer than what it was when it was in its text format, and also it's much more live. So I feel like it gives a much better sense of who I am as an educator, which is the purpose of my portfolio. So I think if we can support students in the technical side of it, it really allows them to showcase their who they are and excuse me, and the learning that they have engaged with as part of a module or a program.
And if you can minimize that technical impact, I think it allows more space for that learning portion. So if you can give them support at the time they need it, and like front load the support is what I would try and do, that the technical issues tend not to be as prevalent.
Yes, and the other thing I suppose is maybe to show examples. So I was really sort of playing with Mahara and seeing, could I do this and could I do that, and seeking feedback from colleagues. Whereas I think if learners have examples of how they can have media-rich portfolios that really showcase their learning, that it might help them to see how they might use the tools. And it doesn't need to be a whole range, but incorporating some video, audio, or imagery can be useful. But I do see your comment, Julie, around that you can just plonk images without explanation. And that's true, but I think we see that in written assignments as well, where we have quotations randomly put in that without any explanation. So I think that comes down to maybe learner effort and so on.
What I force them to do is, if they're putting in evidence, is what I call, like any multimedia artifact, is they have to put in like a 2-sentence explanation of how the evidence relates to the reflection.
I think that's a really good idea, and it's just good practice. But I suppose learners don't really have, is this a term, the learning portfolio literacy, to know what's appropriate or not in that context.
Might be a term now.
Yeah, and I'm just reading through some of the chat, and absolutely, so showcases of portfolios. I know Laura certainly referred to the series of examples that we have posted on our help page for our students, and they came from that showcase competition that we ran last year, and it has proved very useful for others, so that they can see, they can visualize how a portfolio can be rich and include all kinds of materials, reflections, artifacts, etc. And just as regards to the comment on peer mentoring, again, yeah, I made it my business to trawl an awful lot of websites of institutions that had ePortfolio implementations, and I suppose cherry pick some of the best practice that I saw, and the use of peer mentors was another one that we have actually implemented here in DCU. And again, yes, students helping students, and students developing their own portfolios and then being able to share those with others is very effective as well. Okay, so thank you very much everybody for all your suggestions and how to support creativity. Oh, thanks Roger, another example, that's super. Do feel free to keep on typing. Just at this point, just move on to our final kind of a question as regards ePortfolio based assessment, because obviously there's many purposes for using ePortfolios, or learning portfolios as we call them here in DCU, but specifically most of our faculty are using them for assessment purposes. So just a quote by Rhodes, and it's a call, it's a plea really for research and information around the area of how we can use ePortfolios to help the students synthesize their learning outcomes from a course. And I think it's certainly a struggle we've had here, and I'm sure it's a struggle for many, in to try and design and to support faculty to design effective and authentic assessment that does support those student learning outcomes. But I think that there's probably multiple elements there. It's the design or the reimagining of the assessment, and it's then scaffolding provided by both the faculty in and around the purpose of using the ePortfolio for this particular assessment and the benefits of doing same, and then of course scaffolding the technical concerns around that. And then finally, of course, you've got the grading of those assessments. So there's multiple issues really around this. In DCU, we're trying to, I suppose, tackle some of those by running a series of faculty-focused workshops around ePortfolio-based assessment. But you know, as with any of these, take-up is still small, so we're not exactly preaching to the choir yet. And I'm happy to share any of those workshops that I've put together with anybody who's interested. So do feel free to contact me. With regards to good and authentic and effective ePortfolio based assessment, through the unconference and through the people that came to that unconference, we started collaboratively developing a book of samples. I suppose we talk about exemplars for the students, but it's really, these would be exemplars for those who are kind of new to or coming recently to ePortfolio based assessment. So again, that's a bit of a work in progress and will take the form of an ebook, which I hope to collate and share towards the summertime. So again, I'll share via various channels if anyone is interested. Do feel free to contact me, and if anyone would like to contribute an example of good ePortfolio assessment that they've designed, then I'd be more than happy to include that as well. That would be super. So with that, I will turn the question over to you. So in your practice, what have you found that is key to the design and support of effective ePortfolio assessment? So I'd love to hear you speak or type. That would be great. A couple of people typing. Formative assessment points.
Can you hear me? Yes.
Interesting. Edward, would you care to elaborate?
See the value in building a portfolio if they have regular interaction with their tutors to see how they're progressing. Yep. I think the tutor coming in not just at the end, because then they'll just see it as a regular assessment like an essay, but if they get the interaction with someone to give them feedback, and then they can see how it's more of a portfolio and they're developing through the feedback they're getting. I think that's essential in terms of getting students on board and developing a portfolio.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And large numbers of our faculty here do incorporate that kind of feedback. And in fact, in one particular instance, because of consistent feedback to the students and comprehensive, I suppose, journaling of their learning throughout the course, the failure rate for that particular module dropped from 15% down to 3%. So it does have, you know, a big impact. So, Julie, we found the development of clear grade descriptors, and I've just gone off my screen. Okay. And exemplars, yeah, absolutely. Do feel free to chime in or just type your response. I think what was interesting when we evaluated, or I was just about to say that, what was interesting when we evaluated our ePortfolio users after the first year is that there was one area that came upon as weak. They did struggle technically. The platform is fine, but there is a bit of a learning curve with Mahara, and we gave as much technical support as we could, but it was still not enough. But secondly, the area that was actually proving to be more problematic to the students rather than the technical issues was the lack of scaffolding by the tutor, and that was around the purpose of the assessment, not the technical know-how of how to put it together. And some students actually quoted that it was just the same assessment but just done on a different medium. There was no, I suppose, care taken to reimagine or redesign the assessment to make it authentic or to take advantage of the potential uses of ePortfolios or benefits of ePortfolios. So that was interesting, and that was really what actually.
And you bring up a great point there, Lisa, that you know you have to think about, is a portfolio the right tool for this job? And one really nice, I think it's the Chen, is it the Chen and the Penny Light book is a really nice kind of little series of questions that say, you know, that helps you decide, is this the right task? And if it's not, don't use it. You know, sometimes people are trying to shoehorn it in because, you know, they want to use the new tool or the new tech. There was a good example actually, if Nolene, I hope, could I call on you, Nolene? We had an example of this last year in literature. No, if you want to tell about that, putting you on the spot. Yeah, I can't hear you now. Actually, no, you're yellow.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, great. Yeah, we decided to use it for one of the literature assignments where students developed an artifact. And again, we kind of talked about whether we'd use the template or not, but then we decided we'd just let them loose and go for it. And I suppose they had never used it before, and some of them found it very difficult to use. Some of them literally did the assignment in a Word document and attached the Word document to their portfolio. There was various different displays, and I kind of was almost going to pull away from it, but then we talked about it further. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at some of the better ones and actually ask those students if I can use them next year to show the students the kind of thing we're thinking of. So, you know, it was, no, it was their first experience, and again, similar to that, some of them were like, I don't understand what the point of doing it this way is, but I thought it would be a good one because they'd be able to upload pictures, because part of it was that they needed to have an image of their artifact, and you know, so I thought it would be a great way to display them. But
it was a modernist artifact or something, wasn't it?
Sorry, yeah, a modernist artifact.
Yeah, but I think that's a good example of, you know, we weren't sure whether actually the ePortfolio was the right approach there, and you know, it was a bit bumpy.
Yeah.
Like all new implementations.
Can you hear me?
Actually, does anyone have any other similar stories of failure? Sometimes failure is more interesting than success.
Yeah. I do actually. Am I coming through okay?
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, I was working with a first-year seminar, which is a one-credit kind of non-academic course, and they were interested in using ePortfolios. So I thought, great, this would be an excellent way to introduce ePortfolios to a large section of our incoming students. But it turns out all they wanted was the students to answer 4 reflection questions that were text-based, and so we ended up trying to get students to use the portfolio system in something that could very easily have just been done as a Word document. And I think probably that whole experience, rather than promoting ePortfolios on campus, really did the opposite. It made it much more difficult to get people to think about ePortfolios later.
It's a good example. And actually, I don't know if you've seen or read, there was a recent publication by some of our colleagues on ePortfolio literature. I'll put the link into the chat box, but one of their findings was there was a lot of positive, so most of the studies only reported positive findings. So I suppose maybe it'd be interesting to hear the negative findings too.
Absolutely. So I guess we'll draw this section to a close. Do feel free to keep on typing if you have anything else to share, any keys to the kingdom, any wisdom or assistance that you can provide in supporting effective ePortfolio-based assessment. Love to hear it. And what we are doing is recording this, and I will also go through the transcript and see if I can capture any of the main themes to and share those themes back to the group after that. So anyone else want to participate at this point? We good? Great. We've just collated a number of references which I'm sure most of you have already seen, but if you haven't, there's just a number of references, and of course we'll make this presentation available to you all afterwards as well. And we are coming close to our time, so what I wanted to say firstly is thank you to everybody so much for joining the discussion today, particularly all our colleagues from across the various waters from this small island. And just leave you on a couple of points. Christina from Mahara has very kindly recorded a video specifically for us to illustrate some of the changes that are going to be coming with 1804 with the new instance of Mahara in April. So in a moment we'll pop that into the chat box so you can view that at your own time. But obviously the main focus of Mahara 1804 is to focus on GDPR and make sure we're all compliant, which I'm sure will be relevant to everybody that has any dealings across Europe at all. And the one little thing that I will share that I'm very happy about, and some of you may have struggled with it too, is that there is now a rotation tool for images going to be coming with 1804. I know that's something that our students have struggled with, getting their images the right way around. So that's all very exciting, and that's coming soon. And I just wanted to bring your attention to the CRA ABLE International Seminar, which is taking place on May 23rd to 25th. That's actually going to be happening here in DCU. I know we'll have a large number of visitors from overseas, and whilst the call for proposals has now closed, the registrations window will be opening up soon. So hopefully we'll see some of you there. I'd like to extend the invite to come join us. And finally, in keeping with the kind of collaborative tone of the call, keep in touch. So I will certainly be keeping in touch with everybody through the auspices of Eportfolio Ireland, and thanks to Orna, Julie and Karen for all their help and support with that. But I'd love to see some kind of collaboration between us within the country or outside of the country across the various waters. So it would be super to keep that kind of interaction going. So
I have it actually ready.
if anyone
I was
has
just going to
any
say that.
closing comments,
Yeah.
or did you want to add anything there?
And I'd just say as well, yeah, if you can
Julie's
come to
link.
the seminar
Julie's
in
link.
Dublin, I think it's going to be really
You have
good.
it there. Would you post,
There are
will you
some,
post that into the chat box?
you know, quite a varied group of speakers and some big names that from, well, it's a few big, one big name in particular from the States coming so far. I've noticed Barbara Yancey, who's really interesting on reflective writing. So if you can come along, be great. We're going to be presenting on the unconference. So it'd be great to see you all again.
Yes, and as I said, the spirit of collaboration is strong, and based on our visit over to New York last year, actually myself and Daniel Old from John Jay, we are actually going to be together presenting on the mentoring program, or the peer mentor scheme that we have here. So that'll be great. So we'd love to see more of that. So again, sincere thank you for everyone who turned up today, particularly to those of you who turned up today twice at the earlier time. I will keep you informed of our next face-to-face meeting, which we hope to have in early September.
Just to say, that link I put in there, the YouTube link is the link to the new Mahara update.
We'll speak to you all.
Lisa, so that's from Christina Hopner from Catalyst. And what is it again?
From Catalyst, it's outlining the updates to 1804 Mahara release. So thanks again, and hope to talk to you at least virtually again.